Hello, everyone. You're listening to week 25 of Monday Night Chats with Dazz, and I'm going to be checking in the chat in just a few, putting up the screen right now. And I see right now that I'm talking to myself, but this week's topic of discussion, as far as the stream goes, is mid-April tragedies. And I see Craig Gaddis just popped in. Hi, Craig. How are you? And I see he said he's first on the line. Yes, you are. It should be really interesting today to talk about this because even though we're actually only into the second week of April, next week is the third week. I would have waited till next week, but I'm having Ronnie on from the Limitless channel to talk about parabolic teachings. How was your week, Craig? And I see you saying, great, Daz, and you? um, I'm doing okay. I still have a bit of that lingering cold from like the last month or so. I know like it's been a while. I keep telling you guys every week I have a cough or something going on, but I'm hoping by the end of this month things will get better. In just a second, I'm gonna take something and then I'll be right back. Okay, I got my sound back. I'm sorry, guys. I had muted my mic for a brief second to do something, and looks like it's back up and running again, which is good. But I see that Craig said I did a lot of swimming, and it's made me feel like a little kid again. It's really good, though. Swimming can really be good for your health, and I'm glad that you're getting in that extra workout. Hi, Sister Joy. I see that she said that she recently missed connecting with me on the Dreamcast. Very disappointed. Oh, don't be. We can always do another one another time. I saw your email. I didn't get a chance to reply yet, but it was good hearing from you. But some things that I really, and let me see how many people are listening at the moment, because I don't want to get too deep into a topic and then more people show up, but I guess we can get started with it. And then as people come in, just fill them in. But we're coming up on the third week of April next week, and I figured it'd be a good time to discuss some of the trends that we see. And I see Craig is asking how school, Daz. Oh, school. School is stressful at the moment. I got like 4 weeks till graduation, and I'm really trying to get a lot done at once, on top of trying to finish some stuff up for my first novel that I'm publishing next Wednesday. So school's been kind of stressful at the moment. Hi, Andrew C. And I see you saying hi, everyone. Hi, Daz. And hi, Perpetuant. And Perpetuant saying, what is the dark history of the third week of April? Good night. Okay, so let's get into it, guys. So I want to start with talking a little bit about some historical events that have transpired, and I believe, do I have screen share on still? No, I took it off. Sorry, guys. Let me put it back on the screen. All right. So on the screen, and I have like a bunch of tabs open. Actually, I have Vice up because they had a calendar of this. And going back to the year 1906, there was the San Francisco earthquake, and that occurred on April 18th. And afterwards, there were city fires that lasted for several days. 3,000 people died, and it was the second worst natural disaster in the United States history. Another event that occurred in mid-April was the sinking of the Titanic. This occurred on the midnight of the 15th. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, 1911 is when the ship actually hit the iceberg and 119 Americans died. On April 16th of 1947, there was a cargo ship that improperly stored ammonium nitrate and fertilizer and exploded off the coast of Texas, causing a chain of reactions that blew up other ships and freight. The explosion killed at least 581 people and set the stage for the first class action lawsuit. It was the largest industrial disaster in U.S. history, and that was the Port of Texas City explosion. Can't forget the Bay of Pigs invasion on April 17th through 19th in 1961. 1,500 Cuban soldiers trained by the CIA invaded Cuba in an attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro. On April 18th, 1983, there was also the United States Embassy bombing in Beirut, and it killed 63 people and included 17 Americans. There was also the Elijah, Missouri siege on April 16th through 19th. In 1985, the FBI surrounded the headquarters of a group of white supremacist Christian terrorists called the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, and the standoff ended peacefully, but the event allegedly helped inspire the Oklahoma City bombing exactly 10 years later. And it's on this list, and I'll get down to it. So then there was the Ruby Ridge helicopter incident that occurred on April 18th of 1992, but it lasted until August of 1992. And a helicopter working for Gerardo Rivera flew over. The crew reported hearing shots fired toward it. And with this incident, a group of isolated doomsday preppers in Idaho and some overzealous federal agents didn't turn deadly. Well, it didn't turn deadly till August. And I'm sorry, guys, if I'm skipping around here. But one interesting thing about this, and I'm going to look back over at the chat because I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking and I just like to get you guys' views on a lot of this. But there seems to be a trend, at least in mid-April, where you see at least cult groups as well. And I think a lot of these groups are CIA or FBI. They're put out by them and they're used, but it does seem that these sorts of things tend to happen as well as natural disasters. And looking back in the chat, I'm seeing that God is the Alpha and the Omega said hi, and I see Chug Live Charlie Boy also did. Hey, and I see Craig Gaddis said I stayed at the Beirut Hilton in 1970, and 6 months after my family was there was a bombing there. I'm glad that you're okay, Craig. And really fast, guys, I'm doing a mic check and I see that things are still working. All right, so I'm going to go back to looking at this list. I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts and say hi to anyone that was popping in the chat. But all right, so on April 19th of 1993, there was the branch of the Davidian fire. It was the 51-day siege of a compound associated with the oddball sect of the Seventh-day Adventist in Waco, Texas. It concluded when the FBI attempted to raid the facility, resulting in a fire that consumed 76 people. There was also the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19, 1995. A Gulf War vet blew up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City using 7,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, killing 168. There was a Columbine massacre on April 20th, 1999. 15 people died in the worst high school shooting in history. There was the Virginia Tech shooting on April 16th of 2007. 33 people died in the second deadliest single shooter incident in US history. And it's interesting about this too because you have the number 33 here. There was the BP oil spill on April 20th of 2010. There was the Boston bombing. And a lot of these things too coincide with the Illuminati card game. And if we keep going, there was the 2013 Texas fertilizer plant explosion. On April 17, 2013, 15 people died at an ammonium nitrate fertilizer factory. And it seems like ammonium nitrate is a compound that I keep seeing popping up in a lot of these incidents as well every time there's an explosion. So they end the article here, but giving a little context back to this whole third week of April tragedy. If we look at occult holidays, April 19th to May 1st is a 13-day period leading up to Beltane or May Day, which is a huge occult holiday for those in Satanism. And this is a time of great human sacrifice. And I see that Paul popped in from Understanding Conspiracy. Hi, Paul. And hi, Nick. And I see that Craig Gaddis said that he looked up the Hilton's manager's daughter when he was staying there, and we were only 10, and we really hit it off. No, he hooked up. I'm sorry. Wow. And I see that. Hi, Nicholas Brown, and I see that he said, wow, bad week. Yes, this week in history is considered one of the deadliest weeks. Hi, Bobby Bruschetta, and I said that, and I see that he said, hi, everyone, please pray for me. I broke my foot Saturday at work and need screws, grr. We will pray for you, Bobby, and I'm sorry to hear about your foot. Craig said, is April supposed to be worse than other months? Well, some people see April as a cruel month or worse than other months. I would say that it's a highly ritualized month. A lot of people have noted the trend. There's been hundreds of articles written on this. I can remember even when Virginia Tech happened back in 2007, my mom was saying, hey, it seems like this week in April there's always something dangerous or bad happening. You just have to be careful. And it seems like there's a lot of urban legends that surround it, but this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I wanted to get into some of the history behind why this is. And I see that Lisa's also saying that Bobby Bruschetta, she's sorry to hear about it, and hi, Roused. And I see that Sister Joy said 420 equals 6 and reduces into the occult prime power number of 33. That's a good observation, Sister Joy, and you're totally right about that. Numerology is everything in looking at this, and 420 is also Hitler's birthday, and it's also, you know, a huge day for marijuana users as well. And I also see that Lisa said sorry, and in the fall too. Yeah, the fall. Each season has its own times of rituals, but since we're coming up on it, I just thought it'd be interesting to observe all of the tragedies that have happened, and tying this back to here I have on the screen, and this is from another site, and this goes into what Sister Joy was mentioning with 420. It's also the 110th day of the year, but in leap years, it's the 111th day in leap years. And this is fascinating because we know that 1111 or 111 or any repeating numbers is considered an angel number. And we know angel numbers can be seen as good or bad signs depending on who you ask. Also, April Fool's Day, and I don't think it's on here, but I learned this, it's the 13th week of the year. So even just the month of April kicks off in the 13th week. And also, as mentioned earlier, there's a 13-day span between the 19th of April and 1/5 or May 1st. So What's fascinating about that is we know that May 1st is what's considered the Illuminati's birthday or Beltane, and it's a day of sacrifices, but we noticed a lot of these events took place on the 19th or sometimes on the 18th. And also 5-1 also equals 6, and Earth Day is also in this third week period too on the 22nd. So this site gives a few extra historical events than Vice gave, some even further back than what Vice listed. And on April 19th, 1775 was the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which made the Masonic-led Revolutionary War inevitable. April 19th, 1904 was also the Great Fire of Toronto. April 18th of 1906 was the San Francisco earthquake fire, which was mentioned in the Vice article. April 19th of 1936 was the biggest show of military strength since World War I. Germany paid homage to Hitler with a show of 300 tanks. And they have many and other dates, and I'm not going to read all of them just because we got into that with the other article, but we look at the Beltane Festival, also called Walpurgis Night. This is the highest day on the Druidic witches' calendar, while May 1st is the Illuminati's second most sacred holiday. This is a time of human sacrifice, emotionally and physically, and the celebration usually begins the night before on the 30th. It can be a 2-day event. And interestingly enough, according to this, Hitler decided to kill himself on April 30th at 3:30 p.m., which also created the 333. And there's also a great bonfire lit on the eve of Beltane as well. There's also the maypole, which originate from the celebration of Beltane, since fertility is being asked of the earth goddess. The maypole is the phallic pyramid-shaped symbol, and the circular dance around the pole forms the circle that is symbolic of the female sex organ. 4 6-foot alternating red and white ribbons were connected to the pole. The men would dance counterclockwise while the ladies danced clockwise. The union of the intertwining of the red and white ribbons symbolized the act of copulation, and this is remembered as a time of fertility and celebration. Now, what I also find interesting about this is if you do a little more digging into this, a lot of this goes back to Baal and Ashtaroth, which are Canaanite deities that were often mentioned in the Bible and that Israel got in trouble for committing idolatry for. And something that stood out to me was the ideal of these Ashtaroth poles, and we see this pop up here in the maypole ritual. And when you look at even the idea of paying homage to Ashtaroth, which was Baal's wife or female consort, I believe that even just like the tradition of stripping, like modern day stripping, comes from these Ashtaroth poles. And I just find that very interesting as well. And I'm looking back in the chat, guys. I'm sorry, I don't want to ignore you, but I see that Paul said, I imagine this all has a lot to do with it being springtime, the beginning of a new seasonal cycle. Yes, there's always a lot of rituals that follow the new season, and spring and summer are more times where the whole paying homage to goddesses is strong, whereas in the fall and winter, it's all about paying homage to the gods. And this goes back to the fallen angels and back to the Genesis 6 antediluvian period as well. And I see that Paul said the occult love their seasons. Yes, they do. Hi, Ronnie. I see that he said from the Limitless channel, he said, hey, Dazz, and hey, everyone, nice to see you all this week. And he says he's in Toronto. He's from Toronto. That's really nice. That's really neat. And I know I mentioned that in one of the incidents that occurred in this third week time period. Craig Gaddis said, I wonder if these occultists even know or are aware that they will have to face God's judgment. Has Satan fooled them? Well, many of them delude themselves into believing that hell isn't real or that they really won't go there. I can't remember whose video I was watching where they believe this, but some of them really believe hell isn't real, or they think hell is a party. And this might sound weird, but I can remember when I was in the second grade, I met a young girl the same age, 7 or 8, and I remember this girl, she began telling me just out of the blue how hell was a great place, how the devil would welcome you, and how you'd have your own kingdom. And what's sad is in hindsight, I realized that she was into witchcraft, and it sounds like it was a family thing. But some people really believe that hell isn't a bad place, so people feel like, well, they're not going to suffer or pay for what they're doing. I see that Rao said, I'd imagine as time goes on, it'll get worse. Me too. Nicholas Brown said 4/22/18 Flat Earth Day. Andrew C. said some occultists are probably atheists or just don't care, and he's replying to Craig. Paul said, I think it's a mix of being fooled to thinking Satan is the god of the world really, and others know but think there's no going back, so carry on even harder than before. Yes, I agree with you there. Lisa is replying to Craig, and Craig said, I never really understood pure evil. It is hard to understand if you're not in that mindset for sure. Nicholas Brown said the Golden Gate is the vernal equinox. Interesting. And Fairy for Life, High Fairy for Life said Saturn L energy. Lisa said, awesome. Yes, wow, the stripper pole dancers, definite connection, never realized. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things we have modern day, strip clubs, nightclubs, these things go back to the days of rituals in past times. Everything we have came from somewhere. And, it's like we don't think too much about it, but even like, which is the next thing I wanted to talk about in connection to all this. And I hope I'm going in a linear enough fashion so I'm not just going all over the place here, but even getting into like talking about the Cannanites and they're paying homage to Baal and Ashtaroth. A lot of this has to do with fertility, and there was a ritual known as Heiros Gamos, and I'm gonna pull it up and then I'm gonna come back to the chat. But Heiros Gamos in Greek or hiragami refers to the coupling of a god and a goddess or their earthly representatives, often having a symbolic meaning related to fertility or generally conducted in the spring. It can also refer to the primordial union of the masculine and feminine principles within the godhead. The concept of Heiros Gamos derives from the ancient mythologies relating to the union of the first deity, his or her consorts, in terms of the ritual expression of this idea. The heavenly marriage historically took three forms: the union of the god and the goddess as expressed in various art forms, the union of goddess and priest or king standing in the role of the god, or the union of a deity and priestess standing in for the deity. The tradition of Heiros Gamos was usually performed in agricultural societies where these unions were understood to bring rain and fertility to the land, especially in the Middle East. The priestess or priest could also stand for the deity in relationship to citizens or the travelers in the practice of sacred harlotry. And, with this all being said, a lot of these societies surrounding Israel and Israel themselves at times, and this is why they often got in trouble for playing the harlot, they were societies where they depended on agriculture. So for them, doing these sort of fertility rituals to bring rain and to bring fertility to their crops, they were essential. And so a lot of these people would reenact what they believed to be these first marriages. And this is why this really ties back to the antediluvian or pre-flood world. And even with the idea of sacred harlotry, this is where it gets kind of crazy, but just like with the Ashtaroth poles and stripping, prostitution itself was actually seen as a high, honorable thing in the past. It wasn't seen as something lowly like it is today. Prostitutes used to be regarded as sacred because
there was something known as sacred prostitution, and you had women that were temple prostitutes, and they did this in honor of the gods. And this goes back to the Watchers and all of the wickedness that they introduced. And I believe it was Azazel, and that was the who introduced fornication, or in some translations that's prostitution. But this all goes back to this. And when we're looking even at this whole April trend, even the month of April, I believe, is named after Aphrodite, and Aphrodite has many names, but one of her names could also be Ashtaroth, the goddess of love. This all ties back. And let me go back to the chat, guys. But it's just crazy how this all works, and my computer is being really slow here, but I see that Andrew C is talking to Craig, and I see Rao said many occultists don't believe in God, which equals believing there is no Lucifer. Yes, some don't. Craig said perhaps they are fooled to think that Satan will win in a battle against God. How foolish. Yeah, some definitely do think that Satan can win, which I think is foolish as well. Truth is truth, saying super thumbs up. Andrew C said, or they may think it's cool to be in that satanic club or just trying it out. There can be many reasons. Yes, there's so many reasons why someone would follow Satan rather than God. And it's foolish to us because we understand the truth, but to them it makes complete sense. And there what in the Bible does talk about Second Thessalonians, a strong delusion, and also those who give way to the reprobate mind. I mean, they're fooled into thinking that doing stuff that's twisted is actually it's logical or it makes sense. Craig said, thank you for everyone's thoughts. Yes, they probably are just atheists and don't believe in an afterlife. Ronnie said so few people learn the truth of the word and the history of the pagans and how they have poisoned the ways of man for all time. Yes, I agree with you. When you're looking at this stuff, when you just look at it, it does seem like just like an odd trend. Why the third week of April? It just sounds like some kind of like superstition. But when you get into it, you realize there is a huge connection to all of this. Rouse said, I started an account on Gab and I have 15 sudden followers. They are all bot prostitutes. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's the same thing that happened to me when I first joined Twitter. The very first time is I got a bunch of like porno bot prostitute looking women following me, and they're on every social media site, and it's crazy how people set these up, but really, these are bots. And I see that Lisa said temple prostitutes whores means beloved. Whore means beloved. Interesting. Rouse said, yeah, total loss of interest to the format. Hi, Edward Tam. Nicholas Brown said, so many religiousness. I wonder who invented them and why. Sister Joy said, Satanists are taught that the crucifixion was victory. Elites in the Middle Ages commissioned a lot of bloody crucifixion art. That's really disgusting, but it's not too surprising. It's like they like to relive out the idea of Jesus being crucified, because even though he snatched the keys of death from Satan in hell, still they like to act as if they like to have an alternate reality where somehow he didn't win. And kind of jumping back over in talking about the Cannanites, this also leads me to something that happened back in 2016 that was quite controversial. So I'm sure many of you guys remember, and a lot of channels did a lot of coverage of this, and I remember talking about it a couple of times, was the Temple of Palmyra and how ISIS had destroyed it. And so because ISIS had destroyed the Temple of Palmyra in Syria, which was destruction of historical architecture art, they wanted to bring the Temple of Palmyra, or then they called it the Arch of Triumph later on, to New York City. And so many people were disturbed by this because they were like, you're bringing the Temple of Baal. And of course, they spelled it Bel to the United States. And they said how they were going to put it up temporarily on April 19th. in 2016, but then those plans fell through, and I think they brought it to London instead. And then they brought it to the United States again they brought it for the first time in September. But even this whole Temple of Baal, just connecting this back to this time period, it was no mistake that they wanted to bring it to the United States and that they brought it to London in this time period of this 13 days where there's a lot of occult sacrifices. And we see them constantly wanting to reenact or bring back these days, and they do so by taking small steps, similar to whenever they had that artwork on the Empire State Building of Kali. And we see them try, and for the most part, they're met with a lot of resistance. But every now and then, we have them trying as hard as they can. And looking back in the chat here, and I see that Perpetuant said, they they are those who believe God and Satan are the same person, and there are others who say Satan is Jesus' brother. Yeah, there is a lot of strange beliefs when it comes to just people taking scripture out of context, Gnosticism. But yeah, there are people who believe God and Satan are the same, or they believe the God of the Old Testament isn't the same as the God of the New Testament. Andrew C. said, I think Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Satan and Jesus are brothers, which is ridiculous. It might be them. Yeah, I know there's one group that does actually believe that. Nicholas Brown said, Jesuits, monks, and Roman Catholic Empire actually abridged all of history and mostly destroyed source material. I wonder why. I mean, if you want to try to erase the past, you got to start by getting rid of any recollection of it. But I also see that Andrew C. said, or maybe Mormons, I forgot, lol. Yeah, one of the groups does believe that. I know, now that you're mentioning it. Lisa said, Baal is also a demon they worship. It's gross. Yes, Baal, this whole time period in, is dedicated really to Baal and Ashtaroth. And this is why we see so many of these tragedies. This also leads me into the belief that a lot of these things that are happening um, are orchestrated. I believe they really do sacrifice people at times. I know there are psyops and there are hoaxes and there are false flags, but a lot of false flags do have real human casualties as sacrifices, unfortunately. And I see Nick C said, You're back. It's nice to have you back, Nick. And I see Craig said, and he's replying to Andrew, but something else that's really standing out to me to this month is, and I know that they constantly like to keep rumors of war going, but Trump, I know that he was tweeting some things against Assad, Russia and Iran. There's constantly this back and forth. And of course, there was another chemical attack like last year in Syria that Assad is being blamed for. And the whole thing is a mess. But it seems like I wouldn't be too shocked if we don't see more tragedies related to war. Oh, even with this whole sending all those troops to the border. It does seem like they're preparing for something, and I don't think it's just about illegal immigrants. I think it's much deeper than that. But it does seem like they're preparing for something, and I wouldn't be too shocked if it didn't fall within this 3rd week period. I see that Rouse said destroying the past is part of the Ball Earth. Yeah, and all of this really just, and I see Rouse said we all go to war for oil again. Yep. It's all about, I mean, when you look at this whole situation, because now Syria is saying Israel was responsible for bombing their base, and I wouldn't really be too surprised. I don't think Assad is using chemical weapons on his own on his own people, even though a lot of people are even though that's what they want us to believe in the mainstream media. And there is oil reserves in Syria that Israel wants access to in the United States and their allies. So if they go to war with Syria and they win, they can get access to those oil bases. But yeah, it's sick that they would send us to war, send the United States to war, men and women to go fight over oil. But that's what they do is they always have men in power. They send, you know, poor men and women now because, women have to be included um, to war so they can have access to resources that they want. And I see that Nicholas Brown said, in premortal existence, we were all spiritual intelligence, brothers and sisters. Before we had a body, Satan never got a body, but he was the most beautiful angel yet. Christ's plan was chosen by God. Hi, Black Rain 303, and I see that they said that for the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemy shall cast a trench upon thee, and compass thee around, and keep thee in on every side. Thank you for sharing that scripture. I also see Nicholas Brown said Lucifer was part of the host of heaven. Why wouldn't he be related to all the spiritual children of God? Craig Gaddis said a few days ago I saw in the headlines on magazines that Melania Trump's wife wants to leave Trump and take their son with her. It was on the cover of a large magazine, Newsweek maybe. I haven't heard that headline. Wouldn't be too surprised. I really feel like we're gonna. I mean, it's just crazy times at this point. I mean, I'm a firm believer that every president is selected. I don't believe that anybody really wins. I know there are some people out there that are Trump supporters and all that, but I wouldn't be too shocked if there wasn't a divorce because it would be the first of its kind. And it just seems at this point like they're just pushing the envelope since, Trump is under the label of Christianity. So, why not have him go through you know, some scandal with a divorce with I mean, they already have porn stars talking about how they had relationships with Trump and how that he um, gave them money to keep quiet about it. I mean, it's just a huge mess. Nick C said, sorry for the random subject. So I just learned Lucifer in Isaiah 14 is not Satan, but rather the king of Babylon. Scholarship, not conspiracy theory. Context was talking about the fall of Babylon. Yeah, Lucifer, I mean, I've heard that definitely contested before. I believe it is talking about a king in Babylon at times, but I also believe it is talking about Satan as well. Although Satan's actual name isn't Lucifer, but I see what you're saying, Nick. But everything that we see happening here, I mean, we have to remember at the end of the day that this is the result of principalities. And with it being the result of principalities, everything we see, even in this time period, wars, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, cults going rogue, this is all dark forces behind it. But it's easy to look at the people, and there are people out there who do orchestrate these things. And I see Nicholas Brown said there are many scriptures that talk about the counts of heaven and the one-third that followed Satan who were cast out of heaven. This is common knowledge to anyone who actually looks into theology. I know a lot of people reference Revelation 12, I believe, as one of the scriptures as well. Edward Tam said Satan is the accuser. Yes, he is the accuser. And there's definitely just a lot of and I'm sorry guys, like I'm jumping between topics here, but there definitely is just a lot of darkness that surrounds these times. And like I said, I wouldn't be too shocked with everything going on if we don't see another wave of dark events next week or between this week and next week. And since we talked a little bit about the Cannanites, I just wanted to share with you guys from this site, and I may not read everything just because, but I'm going to read a little bit of this because it ties into all of this. So, and I can put the links too in the description of any site that I use later on after this stream, but only recently have scholars begun to unravel the complex religious rituals of Israel's Canaanite neighbors. Much of our knowledge of the origins and character of these fertility cults remains tentative and widely debated. What we do know reveals dark, seductive practices that continue to entice the people God had chosen to be his witness, the origins of Judaism. The people of Israel developed their faith in the wilderness. Abraham lived in the Negev desert where God made his covenant of blood with him and sealed it with circumcision. Moses met God in a burning bush in the desert, where he learned the greatness of God's name and received his commission to bring the Hebrews out of Egypt. God spoke to his people on Mount Sinai and reestablished his covenant with them in the Ten Commandments. Throughout the Throughout the Israelites' 40-year journey in the wilderness, their Lord accepted their Lord accompanied them, protected them, fed them, and guided them to the promised land. There was no doubt that Yahweh was the God of the wilderness. When the Israelites entered Canaan, they found a land of farmers, not shepherds, as they had been in the wilderness. The land was fertile beyond anything the Hebrew nomads had ever seen. The Canaanites attributed this fertility to the god Baal, and this is where the Israelites' problem began. Could the God who had led them out of Egypt and through the wilderness also provide fertile farms in the promised land, or would the fertility God of Canaan have to be honored? Maybe to be safe, they would worship both Yahweh and Baal. An intense battle began for the minds and hearts of God's people. The book of Judges records the ongoing struggle the Israelites' attraction to and worship of the Canaanite gods, God's disciplinary response, the people's repentance, and God's merciful forgiveness until the next time the Israelites reached for Baal instead of Yahweh. Under the kings, the spiritual battle continued. By the time Ahab and Jezebel, the fertility cults appeared to have the official sanction of Israel's leaders. Ahab, with his wife's encouragement, built a temple to Baal at the capital of Samaria, all while prophets like Elijah, which means Yahweh is God, Hosea, Isaiah, and Jeremiah, thundered that Yahweh alone deserved the people's allegiance. It took the Assyrians' destruction of Israel and the Babylonian captivity of Judah to convince the Israelites that there is only one omnipotent God. This struggle to be totally committed to God is of vital importance to us today as well. We don't think of ourselves as idol worshippers, yet we struggle to serve God alone in every part of our lives. It is easy and seductive to honor possessions, fun, relationships, fame, money, and host of other potential gods. We need to learn from Israel's experience and respond to Jesus' command for total allegiance. One way we can accomplish this is to study the gods that attracted Yahweh's people 3,000 years ago. And I'm going to stop right there really fast and say that with all of this that I just read, I really like the way it broke it down a bit, just kind of the struggle that they had in their minds. Because when I used to read through the Old Testament a lot, idolatry to me didn't make too much of sense, because I thought of idolatry kind of like, the worship of wood and stone. And I'd wonder why they would go from worshiping God one minute to suddenly worshiping a bunch of idols when God had done all these miraculous miracles. But when you consider how so many of them, again, going back to what we said earlier, depended so much on fertility for their crops. Many of them, it's like when they hit rough patches, rather than trusting in God, they would trust in these strange gods like Baal. And I'm checking back in the chat and I see that Craig Gaddis said, I keep forgetting Dazz. If I am polite and if I respond to a comment with someone's name, Dazz won't read it. Frowny face. I mean, the main reason I don't read it is just because I know you guys are conversing amongst each other. And sometimes I read the comment, not realizing that it's addressed to one of you guys, but it is nice though, just you guys interacting with one another. But I just want to make sure that I get to any comments that are directed at me or for the stream in general for those who are just listening or who listen back on this later. I see that Nixie said Sister Joy and Dazz, I see what you're saying, like Satan was possessing the king of Babylon. Well, yes, that too, and there are parts I've read that could be referring to Satan in heaven, but then I agree, Nick, that there are definitely parts where it's talking about the king of Babylon as well. Rouse asks, what is all your opinions on the images seen from the sun's lights in Canada and Alaska, like glares of celestial bodies? Are you talking about the aurora borealis? I'm not quite sure what to say about that. I mean, if that's what you're referring to, I know that it can be a naturally occurring thing. It's beautiful. And I see Craig Gaddis said, there are so many ways to sin, and I have to come to the conclusion today that I will sin no matter what. Repenting is my only out. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, as long as we're on earth, we're imperfect, and we are going to sin, but we should do our best to try to not do so. And I see Craig Gaddis said Mormonism has some real crazy beliefs and dress codes and rules very controlling. I don't know too much about Mormonism. I believe it was when I had you on, Craig, when you talked about some of your family members who had wives that had come out of Mormonism and how they were quick to get out. Um, I mean, from what you're saying there, if I were a member of it, I'm sure I'd want out too. And I'm going back to this, but reading here about Baal and Astarae, since these are the two deities that are honored during this time of year. And we see this in modern times. So Baal was the earliest deity recognized by the people of the ancient Near East. He was the creator god El. His mistress, the fertility goddess Ashtaroth, gave birth to many gods, including a powerful god named Baal. There appears to have been only one Baal who was manifested in lesser Baals at different places and times over the years. Baal became the dominant deity, and the worship of the El faded. Baal won his dominance by defeating the other deities, including the god of the sea, the god of the storms, also of rain, thunder, and lightning, and the god of death. Baal's victory over death was thought to be repeated each year when he returned from the land of death, the underworld, bringing rain to renew the earth's fertility. Hebrew culture viewed the sea as evil and destructive. So Baal's promise to prevent storms and control the sea, as well as his ability to produce abundant harvest, made him attractive to the Israelites. It's hard to know why Yahweh's people failed to see that he alone had power over these things. Possibly their desert origins led them to question God's sovereignty over fertile land, or maybe this was simply the sinful pagan practices that attracted them to Baal. Baal is portrayed as a man with a head and horns of a bull. Sound familiar? Sounds like Baphomet to me. An image similar to that in biblical accounts. His right hand, sometimes both hands, is raised and he holds a lightning bolt, signifying both destruction and fertility. Baal has also been portrayed seated on a throne, possibly as the king or the lord of the gods. So Ashtaroth was honored as the fertility goddess in various forms and with varying names. Judges 3:7 speaks of her. The Bible does not actually describe the goddess, but archaeologists have discovered figurines believed to be representations of her. She is portrayed as a nude female, sometimes pregnant, with exaggerated breasts that she holds out, apparently as a symbol of fertility. She promises her followers. The Bible indicates that she was worshipped near trees and poles called Ashtaroth poles. And you can see Deuteronomy 7:5, 12, 2 through 3, 2 Kings 16:4, 17:10, and Jeremiah 3:6 and 13, and Ezekiel 6:13. And some cult practices that people did. So Baal's worshippers appeared appease them by offering sacrifices, usually animals such as sheep or bulls. Some scholars believe the Canaanites also sacrificed pigs and that God prohibited his people from eating pork in part to prevent this horrible cult from being established among them. At times of crisis, Baal's followers sacrificed their children, apparently the firstborn of the community, to gain personal prosperity. The Bible called this practice detestable. God specifically appointed the tribe of Levi as his special servants in place of the firstborn of the Israelites, so they had no excuse for offering their children. The Bible's repeated condemnation of child sacrifice shows hated God's hatred of it, especially among his people. Ashtaroth was worshipped in various ways, including through ritual sex. Although she was believed to be Baal's mother, she was also his mistress. Pagans practiced sympathetic magic, that is, they believed they could influence the gods' actions by performing the behavior they wished the gods to demonstrate, believing the sexual union of Baal and Ashtaroth produced fertility. Their worshippers engaged in immoral sex to cause the gods to join together, ensuring good harvest. And this would be what we talked about earlier with Heiros Gamos. This practice became the basis of religious prostitution. The priest or the male member of the community represented Baal. The priestess or female members of the community represented Ashtaroth. In this way, God's incredible gift of sexuality was perverted to the most obscene public prostitution. No wonder God's anger burned against his people and their leaders. So I'm going to stop right here for a bit and jump back into chat. And I know I'm reading a lot here, and I don't want to just read and blow off the chat. And I see that Craig Gaddis replies with 4 ants, yes. And I see Nick C said Mormons are polytheist. Raul said, Dazz, you got to see this footage. Be right back. Perpetuant said, we will say, hey, Dazz, at the beginning of any directed to you. Otherwise, continue with your discussion. We are listening. Thank you, guys. And I see that Craig Gaddis said maybe this is why there aren't a lot of Jewish surfers. Are they afraid of the water? I don't know. Raul said watch channel Universal News Media, WSO. And Perpetuant said so Baal is Zeus. Yes, a lot of these gods or goddesses that the Canaanites worship, they transfer over to other communities. So Zeus, Baal, Nimrod, Marduk, they have many names. Most people, I think, are familiar with like Greek mythology. So because of that, they're more likely familiar with those names rather than the Canaanite names. Because to be honest with you, I can remember even when I took art history and I took ancient history, the Canaanites weren't one of those civilizations that we paid too much attention to or even covered. And every time I read about the Canaanites in the Bible, I knew that they were constantly being spoken of being into idolatry, but I didn't really know too much about them in general. So, yeah, Zeus and Baal are one and the same. Ralph said all human gods are Baal. IMHO. I'm not sure what that stands for. And I'm going to go back and finish up this little piece of the article and then come back to chat with you guys about it. But in the New Testament, so many, if not all, of the Old Testament gods had disappeared, at least in name. By the time of Jesus, Beelzebub, based on the Philistine god Beelzebul, had become a synonym for the prince of demons. Satan, many of the ancient pagan deities lived on. However, now identified with the gods of the Greeks and Romans, the nations who controlled the people of Israel before and during the New Testament times. It is not appropriate here to discuss all the gods and the goddesses of the Greco-Roman pantheon. However, a few of them were significant in the first century, and some are even mentioned by name in the Bible. The leader of the gods, Zeus, Jupiter to the Romans, took on the role of Baal, the god of weather or storms. Artemis, the goddess of childbirth and fertility, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, continued the Ashtaroth cults under a new name. Acts 19:35 speaks to this, but with the worship practices that were as immoral as ever. It is said that at Corinth alone there were more than 1,000 prostitutes in Aphrodite's temple. Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, became the namesake for the place of the dead and even for hell itself. In Matthew 16:18, Jesus referred to the gates of Hades, or the underworld, believed by some to be the grotto at Cesare Philippe, from which one of the sources of the Jordan River came. The grotto itself was part of a temple complex used in the worship of the Greek god Pan. Pan was depicted as an ugly man with horns, legs, and ears of a goat. Most stories about him refer to sexual affairs. The worship practices of his followers were no different. Pan was associated with Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and orgies, whose worshippers continued many of the sexual rites of the Old Testament gods of the Baal cult. Dionysus was worshipped in the pagan Decapolis across the Sea of Galilee, from the center of Jesus' ministry. Clearly, though the names of the gods had changed, the people's worship practices had not. Only the child sacrifices of the Baal cult came to an end with the Greeks and Romans. In magic and the occult, many ancient peoples practiced magic. They foretold the future by examining animal entrails or by watching flights of birds. The Greeks had oracle shrines where gods supposedly communicated the future to priests and priestesses. Demon possession was the topic of much fascination. Many sorcerers claimed to have the ability to cast out demons. Acts 8:9 through 24 and Acts 13:6 through 12 speak of this. And and as did some Pharisees. Because the Bible in both the Old Testament and the New Testament recognized the reality of the demonic world and condemned all of its practices, Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12 and verse 20, Micah 5:2, and 1 Corinthians 10:20 through 21, we can be sure these practices continued and were a temptation to many. Jesus provided the ultimate solution to resisting the seductiveness of pagan idol worship. He showed that he alone held power over the demons, sending them into the abyss. Luke 8:31. He promised his disciples that his church would overcome all evil, even the gates of hate itself. In conclusion, though today our gods, such as money, power, and possessions, are less personalized than in ancient times, the temptations for us are no less enticing. We would do well to remember the complete powerlessness of the pagan gods from Baal, Canaan's bloodthirsty fertility god, to Hades, Greek god of the underworld, to prevail against the one true God and his Son, Jesus Christ. So I really liked that, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And I'm jumping back over here, but I would go a step further to say that I do agree that for most people that idolatry lies more in materials and in ideologies, but for some, the worship of these deities hasn't gone away. And this is why we see the trends of these rituals continuing on in this April period, because some people have not let go of the worship of these deities. There's always going to be those who, no matter how many times go by. And the trick about it is many of them do pose as atheists or agnostics, but they continue their idolatry to this day. And I'm jumping back in the chat really fast to see what everyone has to say. I see Andrew C is saying hey again. Um, I see Craig Gaddis said all the Mormons that I have encountered on the road and in Salt Lake have been very kind and friendly to me and my companions. They are just being deceived. It's a plain shame. Rouse said Universal News has short videos copied from government time-lapse cams. You can play one later if time allows. Remind me and I'll try to do so, maybe closer to like 7:40ish. Craig Addis said I have known about the 10% of their income for most of my life. Yes. Perpetuant said, "Hey Dazz, it is interesting you said Nimrod. Was listening to a topic by another YouTuber about Nimrod. They believed him to be a Nephilim, and there are actual physical accounts of him." Yeah, Nimrod is a fascinating character for sure. I do think he was human at one point, at least, because if you read at least in the Septuagint, it says that he became a giant, which I find interesting language. So he may have found a way to alter his DNA in that time period. I know there's nothing new under the sun, and we know that in the pre-flood world that there was a lot of advancements in science and medicine and technology that went away after the flood, but it doesn't mean that in a lot of these like pyramids, temples that were built, that they didn't store away the knowledge to use at a later date. And um, if you read the book of, I believe it is Jubilees, it talks about how some of Shem's sons got a hold of the writings of the Watchers and revived a lot of these pre-flood religions. Nick C said, "I don't want to study. I love Dazz's chat streams." Aw. I mean, if you have to study for your classes or your tests, then you have to do what you have to do. It's not as if you can't listen later, Nick. But I see Team Truth said, "Thank you, Daz, for all you do, and may peace be upon us all." You're welcome. And I see Rouse said, "I am HO in my honest opinion." Okay, that makes total sense. I'm sorry I didn't get that acronym. Craig Addis said, "Nothing personal, ladies, but I have seen most of my life that women like to watch and investigate evil more than men. They are intrigued, I guess." I mean, I think part of that is just, I don't know what the deal is. I did a survey, and this kind of leads me to something. I did a survey of 30 people at my school, and I had a few people who volunteered from YouTube. I put out a notice, and some of you guys responded, some of you didn't, but it was over paranormal stuff, like people's belief in it. And at least the people I surveyed, I actually found that more men actually enjoyed watching paranormal entertainment, at least of the people I surveyed, than women. I was kind of shocked by that because I, like you, Craig, thought more women were into it given, the popularity of like things like paranormal romance or, like there's plenty of female centered paranormal shows, but it seemed like at least the men I must have surveyed, they were more into it than the women. I don't know why. But again, it was a really small sample group and I didn't have access to many people and that can really skew a survey, but I just wanted to throw that out there. And I see that Andrew C said that article sounded A1. Yeah, I liked the article. Whoever wrote it did a good job. I liked how they put it into perspective. I mean, when I was looking up stuff for this stream topic about the third week of April, I couldn't help but go back to the history of the Cannanites, and there's just not a lot known about them. And I like the way this person, whoever put it together, did it. I see that Sister Joy was replying to Craig saying, well, Satan did go for Eve. Yes, he did, because he couldn't get to Adam, so he went to Eve instead. So Satan will try to use women to get to men. Andrew C. said, I gotta go now or in a few minutes to do work. Just 1 month left of school. I totally understand, Andrew C. It was nice seeing you in the stream. And yeah, school, it's in the rough parts of school. Like even for me, I'm doing streams, but I'm really cutting it close in terms of schoolwork. But I see that Rouse is replying to Andrew, and Craig Addis said the younger generation is quite a bit different today, where women are much more aggressive towards sex and talking about it on social media. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely those women out there that are more aggressive towards it and talking about it in general. But I also would say that, I don't know, I mean, there's definitely this new generation that's more aggressive, but then I feel like in a way, social media just kind of magnifies um, magnifies people's personalities. Like, there could have been people who would have aggressively talked about sex as well, like women, but maybe they didn't have access to social media to do so. So this generation just is able to hang more out. Like, I think even with the selfie culture, I'm not saying that millennials or Gen Z aren't more selfish, but I also think it's just part of youth. I think if you gave Gen X or you gave the baby boomers, you gave them selfie sticks and you gave them the ability to take selfies in their 20s and their teens and in their 30s, some of them would be doing the same thing. But I guess I'm in defense of millennials a little bit, but I'll just say that I do notice that too. I mean, some women do concern me the way they go about this. I mean, it's just disgusting when anyone talks about their sexual encounters openly, but I definitely would say that there is encouragement for women to be more like men, but I also think social media just magnifies certain people's negative personality traits because they're able to put it out there for everyone to see. Edward Tam said, "Was there sin before Adam and Eve?" From what I read in Genesis and what I understand, at least for mankind on Earth, no. But if there was a pre-Adamic age, then I would assume there had to have been. And I see Andrew C said no, Edward. Well, in a sense, yeah, Satan sinned. Yeah, he did sin, but in terms for mankind. Craig Gaddis said God did a great job of making women so attractive. Bikinis get me every time. I mean, yeah, God did make women attractive to men for the purpose of procreating and, I mean, that's a topic in itself, but um, something else I wanted to kind of I see Nick C said, Craig, come on now, preach. Okay, so that's something that I can't speak on because I'm not a guy and I don't find women in bikinis attractive, but I know for a lot of men that is something that they definitely do. But something I wanted to show you guys, if I can pull it up, and it's connecting to all of this with the Cannanites in April. So this site right here that was mentioned in the article, and here, Cesare of Philippe, or the gates of hell. Isn't this place just really interesting to look at? And I believe I have screen share on so everyone can see. But I really like realizing but I realized this a while back when Jesus did speak about the gates of hell not prevailing. So in Jesus' time, and this is something I forget just because I live in the United States of America, and even if a lot of people are more culturally Christian and they don't follow the Bible, it's still not very mainstream to be pagan. But in Jesus' time, paganism was dominating everything, and so when he made this, he talked about this, the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. This was really pivotal. And I wanted to share this with you guys. And this is also pretty lengthy, so I'm going to jump between. And I believe it might be written by the same author. I'm not sure. It looks like the same format. But I came across this another time. So, the city of pagans, Cesare Philippi, which stood in a lush area near the foot of Mount Hermon. Sound familiar, guys? Mount Hermon is where the Watchers came down. Was a city dominated by immoral activities and pagan worship. Cesare Philippi stood only 25 miles from the religious communities of Galilee, but the city's religious practices were vastly different from those in the nearby Jewish towns. In Old Testament times, the northeastern area of Israel became a center for Baal worship. In the nearby city of Dan, Israelite king of Jeroboam built a high place that angered God and eventually led the Israelites to worship false gods. Eventually, worship of the Baals was replaced with worship of Greek fertility gods. Cesare Philippi, which stood in a lush area near the foot of Mount Hermon, became a religious center for worship of the Greek god Pan. The Greeks named the city Panias in his honor, and I believe today it's named the Banias Nature Reserve. Years later, when Romans conquered the territory, Herod Philip rebuilt the city and named it after himself. But Cesare Philippi continued to focus on worship of Greek gods. In the cliff that stood above the city, local people built shrines and temples to Pan. Interestingly, Jesus chose to deliver a sort of graduation speech to his disciples at Cesare Philippi. In that the pagan setting, he encouraged his disciples to build a church that would overcome the worst evils, the gates of hell. To the pagan mind, the cave of Cesare Philippi created a gate to the underworld, where fertility gods lived during the winter. They committed detestable acts to worship these false gods. Cesare Philippi location was especially unique because it stood at the base of a cliff where spring water flowed. At one time, the water ran directly from the mouth of the cave set in the bottom of the cliff. The pagans of Jesus' day commonly believed the fertility gods lived in the underworld during the winter and returned to the earth during the spring. They saw water as a symbol of the underworld and thought that their gods traveled to and from the world through caves. I find that really fascinating, guys. Just pausing right there, thinking about even going back to the book of Enoch and Genesis 6, the watchers coming down on mountains and them seeing caves as a portal between the spirit world and the physical world. Continuing on, the pagans of Jesus' day commonly believed that the fertility gods lived in the underworld during the winter and returned to earth during the spring. And I'm repeating, so, to the pagan mind, then, the cave and spring water of Cesare Philippi created a gate to the underworld. They believed that their city was literally at the gates of the underworld, the gates of hell. In order to entice the return of their gods, Pan, each year the people of Cesare Philippi engaged in horrible deeds, including prostitution and sexual interaction between humans and goats. That is really disgusting. I just have to say that right now. When Jesus brought his disciples to the area, they must have been shocked. Cesare Philippi was like a red light district in their world, and devout Jews would have avoided any contact with the despicable acts committed there. It was a city of people eagerly knocking on the doors of hell. And I'm going to stop right there at Jesus' challenge and just look at the chat, see what you guys are all saying. But I just find this beautiful because I feel like, at least for me, I had such a Judeo-Christian, view of Jesus' time. I didn't think too much about all the idolatry that was going on around him. And I love how everything he did, of course, it had a purpose to it. And it really brings it home. But I see that Perpetuant said, "Hey, Dazz, make sure this doesn't affect your schoolwork." Uh, I'll make sure of that, and I try to make sure I get everything done before I get on the stream, be responsible in anything I don't get done, and make sure it's due at a later date. Rao said, I'll give my opinion on girls, women, 90+% are materialistic. That's a pretty staggering statistic. I mean, there are a lot, especially in America, that can be materialistic. Perpetuant said, so men aren't attractive to women? No, men are attractive to women, I guess what I'm saying, at least from my perspective, is that I don't necessarily, like when I see a man without a shirt, I don't really experience lust like I guess a lot of men for women, but there are definitely women I know who they lust after men, like men lust after women. And I've been around those women, and they're kind of like what Craig was describing on social media. Craig said, "You would not believe what I am seeing, how women are dressing out in public today in malls, casinos. It's so hard to go out and not lust after them." Man, that's true. You live in Vegas, so you see a lot of things, a lot. Whereas here in the Midwest, I mean, if in the middle of winter, most people aren't dressing like that for the most part. It's much colder at the moment. But there are women, who do put it all out there for people to see. Lisa said, "What did I miss? LOL, sorry." Oh, we were just we're jumping between chat and then I'm reading different articles on the history of idolatry and how it ties into really this whole April thing. Perpetuant said, so all this will happen on the third week of April. Well, I'm praying now in almost every hour. Um, well, yeah, what I'm saying here is that we can't really predict what will happen on the third week of April, but it is a time for of idolatry for some and rituals, and definitely pray during this time period because this is a time of high rituals. And Craig said, just speaking the truth, it isn't always pleasant to discuss what is happening to society today. It's getting worse and worse, in my opinion. And I see Craig Gaddis said, people under 30 years old today, I would guess that 75 or more have more than one tattoo. Yikes. Yeah, I'm not too shocked. I know a lot of people my age, I'm 23 years old, who are tatted up. My parents were not fans of tattoos or marking the body, and I don't believe in marking the body, but I know a lot of people my age who are young. I know people younger than me, slightly older, who are definitely marked up. And I see Lisa saying great history learning, tons of thank you, dazzling one. No, thank you for listening, and you're welcome. I see Nick C saying tattoos are artistic. Andrew C saying dazzling should be a teacher. I don't know about that. I mean, online, yeah. In person, I think I'd freeze up. Craig Gaddis said 75% might be low. It's probably much higher. God tells us not to mark the flesh. Ralph said, could the waters be coming down on mountains at the South Pole under Mount Meru? I'm not sure about that. I'd have to look more into that. Craig said, I'm not judging those who have tattoos. It's a lifetime decision. Ralph said, lust is easy for me, single, but I still won't do anything stupid. Women try to take advantage of me all the time. Sorry to hear that. And I see Pilgrim's Progress. Hi, Pilgrim's Progress. And I see said, or David. I totally forgot to call you by your first name. He's saying no tats here. And same. And I see Rouse said, I find tattoos addictive and slightly peaceful. Lisa says, I have a few tattoos. And she's replying to Rouse. So I'm going to continue reading. And we made it to right here. So Jesus' challenge. So Jesus presented a clear challenge with his words at Cesare Philippi. He didn't want his followers hiding from evil. He wanted them to storm the gates of hell. Standing near the pagan temples at Cesare Philippi, Jesus asked the disciples, who do you say that I am? Peter boldly replied, you are the Son of the living God. The disciples were probably stirred by the contrast between Jesus, the true and living God, and the false hopes of the pagans who trusted in dead gods. Jesus continued, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. See Matthew 16:13 through 20. Though Christian traditions debate the theological meanings of those words, it seems clear that Jesus' words also added symbolic meaning. His church would be built on the rock of Cesare Philippi, a rock literally filled with niches for pagan idols, where ungodly values dominated. Gates were defensive structures in the ancient world. By saying that the gates of hell would not overcome, Jesus suggested that those gates were going to be attacked. Standing as they were at a literal gate of Hades, the disciples may have been overwhelmed by Jesus' challenge. They had studied under their rabbi for several years, and now he was commissioning them to a huge task to attack evil and to build the church on the very places that were most filled with moral corruption. Jesus presented a clear challenge with his words at Cesare Philippi. He didn't want his followers hiding from evil. He wanted them to storm the gates of hell, not ashamed. Jesus' followers cannot successfully confront evil when we are embarrassed about our faith. After Jesus spoke to his disciples about storming the gates of hell, he also gave them another word of caution. If anyone is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his glory. Luke 9:26. Jesus knew that his followers would face ridicule and anger as they tried to confront evil, and his words came as a sharp challenge. No matter how fierce the resistance, his followers should never hide their faith in God. Jesus taught with passion, even when bystanders may have thought him a fool. And at Cesare Philippi, he challenged everyone within hearing. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his very soul? Verse 25. In a city filled with false idols, Jesus asked his followers to commit to the one true God. While false gods promised prosperity and happiness, they would ultimately fail to deliver. Jesus didn't promise an easy life, but he delivered on the promise of salvation, the only kind of prosperity that really matters. Today, Christians must heed the words of our rabbi, especially when we are tempted to hide our faith because of embarrassment or fear. Our world is filled with those who have gained the world but lost their souls. If we hide our faith, they may never find the salvation they need. On the offense, as we listen to Jesus' challenge today, we as Christians should ask ourselves the important question when it comes to the battle against evil: are we on defense or offense? In a culture that embraces diversity, it is offensive to suggest there are certain truths that apply to everyone. Pointing out sin isn't popular, and many Christians are labeled as intolerant for refusing to accept certain behaviors and ideas. Unfortunately, many people have embraced a distorted Christianity that tries to be politically correct. They don't want to offend anyone, so they accept sin rather than confronting it. Ultimately, their words of love ring empty because they accept sins that run people's lives. Other Christians just try to avoid sinful culture altogether. They've been taught to go on the defense, to hide in the churches, schools, and homes, and to shut the door on the evil influence of culture. But Jesus challenged his followers to be on the offense, to proclaim the truth without shame. Our schools and churches should become staging areas rather than fortresses, places that equip God's people to confront a sinful world instead of hiding from it. Jesus knows that the pagan world will resist, but he challenges us go there anyways and build his church in those very places that are most morally decayed. As we listen to Jesus' challenge today, we as Christians should ask ourselves the important question: are we on the defense or offense? And coming back to you guys, but I really liked this article again. It really brought it home. But there's definitely a cultural war that was going on in Jesus' time. And seeing just how the article brought it home, I really liked it. But I came across it a while back, and it had to be something to see him stand up in a place where there was just so much idolatry and say basically that his church was going to prevail against all of that. And I think this is something for us to remember. Even like when I was talking earlier about this whole mid-April trend, and I know I've kind of gone away from that a bit, but we should always remember, even when we're looking into this stuff, who has the real power? As followers of Christ, through Jesus Christ, we have power over all of these things. These Satanists, those who perform these rituals, and it doesn't matter how much money, how much resources that they have. We have Jesus, and I think that's so important to remember, is that we have victory through him. Sister Joy said, I have repented for my tattoos. My body is not my own, but a living sacrifice to the Lord. He tells us to come out of the world. Hi, Darren Prosser, and I see that he said, I'm positive that the rise in promiscuous clothing is related to people who no longer see monogamy as a mandate from God. I know numerous couples in my community who are swingers. I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, there has been an attack on monogamy, and I've heard, many speak out against it, which is really sad. And Darren Prosser also said, one knows the truth of the Lord, but she's given up, so to speak. They are solid middle class people you wouldn't guess necessarily. That's unfortunate to hear. Um, I mean, sometimes people, they know the truth, they know the right way, but for whatever reason, they let hedonism and, their temptation get the best of them. Best thing we can do is pray. And I'm really sorry to hear about that, Darren. Andrew C. said, wow, good question, the article. When it comes to evil, are we on the defense or offense? Yes, I love that. Andrew C. said, I'd be nervous to express my biblical beliefs in my religious studies class, which is full of unbelievers. I feel like I'm going to get stoned or something. No, I know what you mean. It's definitely taboo to, like, go out there and express your beliefs. Actually, there's a guy that I see from time to time, like once a week. He stands outside of the student union and he preaches. And I admire that because you don't see too many people that preach, outside with a Bible, but especially on a college campus. And, most people just walk by him and ignore him. But, so many of us, I mean, even the way I grew up, a lot of us are kind of on the defense. We hide ourselves away. We don't want anything to do with the world. And I do think there's a certain point in our lives where it's better, where, especially when you have children growing up, you want to keep them away from a lot of things so they don't get tainted. But there comes a time where we have to face these things. We can't shut our eyes and pretend that none of this stuff is happening. It's happening around us, and it's so important that rather than feeling like, oh, I'm going to get beaten up and eaten and spit out by the world, that we know the word and we're able to be on the defense. And I just, even when we look at when Jesus was tempted by Satan, you know, Jesus answered Satan in scripture, and Satan also used scripture. But it's so important that we know the word and that we're not scared of Satan, because sometimes some Christians give the world more power, or they give the devil more power than he really has. And that's something I never want to do. Even in talking about like these rituals that happen in this week, it's not to provoke fear in anyone. It's not to say that they have all the power, but it's just a reminder of what's happening, and to pull it back to, this is a spiritual battle that we're dealing with every day. And even the stuff like these conspiracy theories, yeah, we can talk about the elite, we can talk about the Illuminati, but at the end of the day, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and rulers of darkness in high places. And it's so important that we realize this is a spiritual battle. And I see that Sister Joy said 1 John 2:15-17, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Yes. I mean, you can't compromise yourself. And the sad thing is, I see so many churches today, they want to be like the world. I remember the last church I was a part of, um, he always talked about, the pastor always talked about relevancy. And I understand the idea of being relevant to the world, but some churches, I mean, they try so hard to emulate the world that it's almost like, if I'm someone who doesn't believe in God, or I'm an unbeliever, let's say, and I see churches trying to look like the world, it's not going to encourage me to want to come out of the world. It's going to encourage me to stay in the world, because the churches are trying to look like the world. I mean, look at churches like Hillsong, for instance. I see Andrew C. said preach Dazz, and I know that was earlier when we were talking about the article. Rao said, I think we're all on the defense. Sin is all too easy in these days, and all easier as tech progresses. Yeah, it definitely is. It really is. It's hard not to be on the defense, because when you're thinking about it, I mean, we do have to separate ourselves from sin. But when we go into those environments, we don't want it to devour us either. It's a hard balance to strike. And let me go back up because I scrolled past a few. Perpetuant said, "Can I throw the first one?" And I see he's referring to Andrew C. Just kidding. All we have to go through a situation like that. Just keep praying. Let the Holy Spirit guide you. Sometimes God shuts you up for his timing. I totally agree with you, Perpetuant, on that. And I know you were addressing Andrew C., but yeah, sometimes, he does keep us quiet and to learn. And something I've learned, even being in the environments I've been in, studying the sorts of things I've studied, most of the people in my courses are unbelievers. Most of them have very skewed views of religion as they talk about it. And just listening and hearing all they have to say at first was hard for me, but I feel like the Most High placed me in these positions so I can understand what their doctrines are, so I better be able to navigate. And the more I've studied His Word, the more confident I've become in my belief. So when anyone does challenge it, I don't feel as if they're challenging or flipping my views upside down, but I'm like, no, that's not what it says in the word. It's so important we know the word for ourselves because again, when Satan and Jesus they had their confrontation, Satan also used scripture as well. Terry Craig, hi Terry Craig, and I see that they said that am getting accused day and night in my own home. I can't get away from it. Please pray for me. I will pray for you, Terry. I'm sorry to hear about that. Being accused in your own home is never fun. Being accused in general is a terrible thing. Um, but I'll pray for you, Terry. Sister Joy said, I lived a hedonistic life. It looked fun and sexy from the outside. It was sad. I was sad and angry on the inside. I was seduced by the lie. I mean, hedonism will do that to you. I mean, it's like that temporary high you get from, serving all your pleasure. And then, at the end of the day, it's like you feel the aftermath of it. It's kind of like if you binge eat and then later you have a source, like you have a stomach ache and you're vomiting. It's like that. That's what hedonism does to you. Craig Addis said, please everyone, I'm not judging anyone here. I got an A plus in sinning and I'm not proud of many of the behaviors I got involved in. I'm probably the worst sinner here. Lisa is replying to Terry. And I see everyone sending prayers Terry's way. Sister Joy said, and the demons I was attacked by on the way out are vicious. Jesus saves. Yes, he does. Nick C said the chat is messing up and reorganizing. Try not to get confused with it, Dazz. Thanks for letting me know. I'm sorry, guys, if I've read any comments out of order or out of sync, but sometimes these tech issues happen. I see that Perpetuant is replying to Terry. Nick C's talking about Christian hedonism. I see that Rouse said first time it's reloading chat for me here. I wonder what's going on with the chat. Hi Juniper, and I see Juniper said, I go to an art school and hedonism and irreverence is all the rage. This attitude is everywhere in modern art and within contemporary galleries. It really reflects the times we live in, jaded and apathetic. I agree with you there. It is jaded and apathetic times. And, this whole, ratify oneself, live for pleasure, do whatever pleases you thing. I mean, it seems like what's wrong with it? But we see all of the messes that it causes, and a lot of hedonism for many leads to moral relativism and selfishness. Craig Addis said, there is a great old-time pastor named Walter Martin, and he exposes cults. He passed away quite some time ago, but I recommend finding him on YouTube. He has a great biblical knowledge and many debates. Thank you for the recommendation, Craig. I'll have to check it out. And again, that's the thing I like about chat now is that you can go back and look at it live on demand. So anything you guys reference in chat, it can be of great help later on to anyone who goes back and listens to this stream. But I really just like in covering all this because when I set out to talk about these April trend, I was wondering how to go about it and just kind of going back at it and looking at how, yeah, this third week of April, yeah, there are a lot of trends in terms of satanic beliefs, but all of this connects back to, the past, and all of this connects back to the Bible. And I just love when you can connect things back to scripture, but we definitely live in a culture where a lot of these same spirits, like Baal and Ashtaroth are served. They're maybe not served the same way like they used to be, but kind of going off of this hedonism, there's this culture is hypersexualized, and many of you guys brought up things like the way people are dressing, whether it's women mainly, or just the prevalence of pornography everywhere, even to the point where children can have access to it, or even primetime television. Like I was kind of shocked when I started watching TV in the past again, how much nudity they were showing on primetime television. It's just out of control. But this hypersexual culture, It's true we no longer live in an agrarian culture where we depend on agriculture, but it does seem like this whole obsession with sex and prostitution, it's like the sacredness of it in terms of the direct worship to the gods and goddesses has been removed. But this whole stripper culture, this whole prostitute culture, this whole, harlotry culture, it all stems from paganism. And even, the use of drugs, that goes back to the days of worshiping idols as well. I mean, any negative sinful lifestyle you get into, it connects back to idolatry. And even when I look at the job of a prophet, it was to expose idolatry. And even the first commandment was, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." God took this very seriously. He still does. He hates idolatry, and he doesn't care if it comes in the form of direct idolatry, where someone is openly bowing down to Baal or Ashtaroth and performing rituals, or if it comes in people engaging in hedonism and putting their own pleasure first. But this all connects, it comes full circle. I see Rouse said, "I really liked you reading all the scriptures tonight, Dazz." Yeah, I mean, it's great to read scriptures and to connect this back to the word. And I see David said, "Hillsong and the like are a slippery slope. The music is deceptive because it sounds so good, but the doctrines are off." Yes. And that's the thing is, the closest I mean, the best lies are kept closest to the truth. If you really want to seduce anyone into any type of false doctrine, you don't start with stuff like, the peanut butter man is going to take over the world and then he's going to shoot, a nuclear weapon at the moon. And that was really weird. But you don't start with stuff like that that sounds like what people would call schizophrenic. You start with something that sounds, tangible and reasonable. And you slowly ease people into the false doctrine. And that's sadly what Hillsong has done a lot. Um, and, a lot of their music does sound all right, but it's sad though to see how they seduce and get people into it. Even, I was watching, like lately, I've kind of, because my mom sometimes has on like a different church channels like TV and Daystar and others. And, when I was growing up, I used to watch a lot of televangelists. And I understand now a lot of televangelists are like Masons and such, but a lot of their messages sound pretty good. But then you hear the lies sprinkled in with it. And really, it's just sad how Satan does that. But he never usually comes out with something just completely off where you have a knee-jerk reaction like, no, he always gives you he gives you a lot of truth, but just a little bit of lies. It's just like Passover just happened not too long ago. And um, I observe Passover every year. And during Passover, you can't eat leavened bread because leavened bread represents sin. I mean, after Passover, any other time of the year, it's fine to eat leaven. But I think about just a little leaven, just a little leaven in the doctrine, how it can really spoil, it can really pollute. And I see that Juniper said hedonism looks like freedom and Christian life may look like prison, but the real freedom is with God and the outer world is the true prison. Yes, it really does. I mean, there's a reason why God told us not to engage in certain behaviors. Look at STDs, for example. People want to act like STDs are just an unfortunate thing that happens, but that can be the result of sin. Or, people who, get drunk, alcohol poisoning. I mean, you could go down the list of the horrors that come out of, you know, overindulging in things. But hedonism does lead to a prison. But a lot of people see, serving God and, you know, committing your life to Jesus Christ as a prison. Craig Addis said Hillsong has been exposed and they are connecting with the Catholic Church and false prophets. Hi, Stewie May, and I see that he said, hello, I'm late. Hello, all. David said we do need a deprogram from worldly culture. We are in it, but not of it. Be made separate. Yes, we do need to deprogram. And, it's so important, being deprogrammed, being separate from it, but also being able to take that stand when needed. Sister Joy said, God is so much more amazing and powerful than the world. Job 38 blew my mind the first time I read it. Not the God I had ever met before. It's really great to hear, Sister Joy. And I see that Lisa said, dazzling when I totally agree about TV preachers. I was hooked for years. Yeah, I mean, many of them know how to say the right things, and, it's just a little bit of false doctrine here and there. Craig said, these are very tough times. Stay away from the evil and corruption in the world today. It is not easy task. Pray, 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 and ask for God's help. I agree. I agree with you, Craig. And, you know, all of this is so important because David is right. We are supposed to be separate from the world, but at the same time, we have to take our stand as well. And it's so important to understand how we go about doing that. And sometimes he may lead us to stay put and listen. And other times he may lead us to take a stand and be outward about it. We just have to be led by the Holy Spirit is the main thing. And I see that David said, Amen. Yes, let's not hide in plain sight. Nick C said, the moment someone asks for prayer, but you have a weak prayer life, frowny face. I mean, your prayer life can always get better. It just takes a little praying here and there. I start by praying for the small things. Like I always say, pray for a parking spot, pray for a safe commute. Just pray and thank him that I can walk and that I can breathe and that I can talk. I mean, just little things. And as you begin to pray for things in your own life, you begin to pray for other people. Like when people ask you, can you pray for me? But, you build up your ability to pray. Rouse said Dazz has been speaking for an hour and 40 minutes. Awesome. Wow, it has been that long, guys. Time is really flying by. And Rouse, I know you wanted me to look up a video. Can you put the name of the video and the chat, and I can look it up again. I mean, I can look it up with the remaining time. I know close to like 5 minutes till I'm gonna close in prayer, but I see Andrew C says everybody preaching today looks like the Holy Spirit is really out there today. Yes, and I see David is saying, are the temptations in Vegas strong, Craig? And I see he's talking to Craig there, and I see that David is saying, I find beach culture tempting. And Craig is saying, well, I have seen very good for a couple of years, but the bikinis at the pool are darn. Sweet May said, I feel guilty about praying for myself, so pray for others as much as I can. I mean, it's always amazing to pray for others. And I see Rouse said all the videos are similar. I see David saying the immodest beach culture opens the door to lust if I don't guard my heart. Yeah, I mean, beaches definitely can for people. Like I said, I live in the Midwest, so I've only been to the beach like twice in my lifetime. And again, not being a male, I can't necessarily understand all the way, but I could see how it could open the door for lust. And I see that David said just nearly naked women is a stumbling block for men. Yeah, I mean, men are, programmed, well, biologically, attracted to women. So it would make sense that beaches would draw a lot of people in. I mean, bikinis these days have gotten shorter and shorter and show less and less. And now people wear crop tops and really short shorts outside when it's warm. So there's definitely a lot of temptations for men. And I see that Craig said, I don't think Vegas is any harder than anywhere else. Sex is all over the place and out in the open all over the USA. Yeah, it is. It is all over the USA. I mean, I guess, like I say, here in the Midwest, I don't know, there's definitely that culture, but I feel like it's more people are better about keeping it in the clubs and stuff. Like, I feel like at least where I live, if anyone walked down the street looking the way some people dress in certain cities, they would be shamed. Okay, and I see Rouse said Universal News Media is the channel 6. Okay, let me look that up real fast. Is this on YouTube by the chance, Roused? Let me see if I can copy and paste this from chat. All right. Okay, so let me go to YouTube real fast and look this up to see. All right. And which video was it that you wanted me to look at, Roused? Let's see. I see that Lisa saying MK Ultra News anchor scary. LOL. All right. All right. What was the name of the video, Roused? And for some reason, my computer's doing weird things. Okay, the newest is fine. All right.
Good afternoon. This is Universal News Media. Today is April 8th, 2018. Some viewers may recall that on March 24th, a very large, close asteroid was viewed from the southwest-facing weather cam located at the military base just outside Anchorage. At first, I thought it was a one-time pass-by, but I saw it again the next day, March 25th, at approximately the same time of day, around 4 o'clock p.m. After that, the chemtrailing picked up, and I couldn't see the asteroid again until April 1. 6 days later, I was able to monitor the asteroid again on April 7th. Chemtrailing has since been too heavy, but I have 4 days of comparison over a 2-week span of time, and that is enough to provide 4 similar trajectory paths and 4 different elevations of the asteroid. For anyone who doesn't like the Bible, please turn the channel now rather than leaving a nasty comment. I'm going to read 2 verses because I'm going to show where this object is described in the book of Revelations. Revelation chapter 8, verse 10 and 11, King James Version. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains and of water. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. I'm going to show you with trajectory paths and elevation comparisons over a period of 2 weeks why I believe that this is the prophetic burning star just described in the Bible passage. Here is the asteroid on March 24th as it passed by the weather cam in the late afternoon. It is a gigantic rock tumbling through the sky. It comes by each afternoon at about the same time within minutes, which means that it is probably in a medium Earth orbit, for now anyway. And for an object to maintain medium Earth orbit, it must be at least 1,243 miles away. So the fact that we can see this tumbling rock so clearly in our sky suggests that it must be very large. Here is what it looked like yesterday, April 7th. The chemtrailing makes it more difficult to see, but I was still able to find this tumbling asteroid in each frame. And I placed a dot in the center of the asteroid, on each frame, which is 10 minutes. After placing the dots on the asteroid's path every frame, I was able then to draw a line through the dots, defining its path and its relative elevation decline over a period of 2 weeks. I'll be showing those trajectory paths in just a minute. I was also able to get a rough idea of the direction it is traveling, which I'll show in a moment also. We can get a rough idea of the direction this asteroid is traveling around the Earth. We know that the camera is facing southwest at 230 degrees because of this directional map provided by the FAA for this particular weather cam. Knowing that the camera was pointing southwest 230 degrees and viewing the rough trajectory path from the weather cam images, it looked to be traveling in the direction of the yellow arrow on this picture. So basically, from the perspective of Anchorage, Alaska, it appeared to be traveling from the northwest and going southeast around the globe. Here is the path that the asteroid took 2 weeks ago on March 24th. I'm not going to bother showing the March 25th line because it's so close to this one. Here is its path 8 days later on April 1st. And this is what the path looked like yesterday, 6 days later, on April 7th. This chart shows the March 24th path in red, the April 1st path in green, and the April 7th path in black. And as you can see, it appears to be getting lower to the horizon with each pass around the Earth. I'm not an astronomer, so possibly there is another reason why its path appears to be getting lower in the sky as time goes by. I'm only giving you my observation and how I relate this to Bible prophecy. I believe this asteroid came from the celestial system that we've been seeing parts of lately. Many people ask when the system will make its closest pass to our Earth. A general indication of time is provided in the following screens of text. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe.
That was a really good video. Thank you for putting it out there, Roused, for us to watch. And it is interesting to see these signs in heaven and how they could relate to what's going on and for some reason chat I think is messed up. I don't know. But I'm looking back in chat. I'm gonna try to refresh it or see. So I see you guys are commenting on it being Claire. Terry Craig said, I think it's spiritual. It's not people in the house. Sounds like people out, but from far, like there's sin witchcraft to me. Lisa said, wow, that's huge. Project Bluebeam. It could be Project Bluebeam, or it could be a spiritual manifestation. I see Sister Joy is replying, I think, to the earlier conversation about sex not being bad if it's experienced the way God intended it. People are tricked into using it as harmless recreational activity. I agree with you there. But then I see Craig saying her name is Carol.
Okay, so it's Carol, not Claire. Okay. And I see, hi Ben, it's nice to see you again. And I see you said, hey guys, been away a few weeks. What's been talking about right now? So we were playing a video from Carol's channel, but we're gonna wrap up in a few more minutes. But the topic of tonight was on the third week of April or mid-April, and since we're coming to a close, I just want to say that a few things. So I'm going to let you guys know, and I've been saying this since like September when everyone was asking me, when are you going to show your face? When are you going to show your face? I am planning to finally, after 5 years of working on, I'm actually releasing 2 books this year. One this coming Wednesday, so not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday on the 18th. I'll give you more information between now and then, but I'll say this. I am planning on filming a video before the 18th, and I will be on camera and I will be talking about the book. Right now, all I'm waiting on is the cover and formatting for the first book that I'll be publishing. And so look out for that video where I talk about it. It'll be a separate video from my weekly upload. So I'm still going to do a Wednesday video that has nothing to do with my book. Because I don't want my books to take over the channel. But I will be doing a video on camera. So I'm just letting you guys know that. I'm really nervous about it, but that's coming up soon. And look out for the 18th to get more information on it. And also next week I plan to have Ronnie on from the Limitless channel. I would have done this mid-April stream next week because it would have been the third week of April, but because Ronnie was going to be on, I wanted to do it a week early. So next week I'll have him on talking about parabolic teachings, and I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to look back at the chat and have closing thoughts. So Father, I'd like to thank you again for another wonderful week of being able to chat with all of our listeners, and I'm just asking you to help us all to have a good week and be directed and guided by you in all that we do. And thank you again for guiding the direction of the path of the chat, and also for guiding our paths, Lord. We pray that everyone would have a good week in terms of health, in terms of achieving their goals, and that we'd all draw closer to you and be able to resist temptation, as we talked about in chat. We thank you that you're good all the time. In the name of Yeshua Messiah, we pray. Amen. So that was the prayer. And I see that Nick C saying, where's Gigi? Yeah, I mean, I wonder where she is too. Did she miss? I think she missed last chat too, but I wonder where she's been. And I think this chat is messed up. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to refresh the page really fast to see, but it looks like it's working again. And I see Andrew C said, don't be nervous about it, Dazz. You just have to get used to it. Yeah, I'm going to get used to it. I mean, I'm only planning to be on camera for that video and then maybe another one. I'm not brave enough to do live streams with my face for 2 hours. My voice can wear down. I could only imagine how much I'd feel worn down on camera. And I see Watchman for You. Hi, Watchman for You. Said congrats on your new book. Thanks, guys. And I can't wait to share it with you guys. Like I said, I'm still waiting on the cover design. The illustrator is going to be done on Wednesday. I'm thinking that, like I said, the video will come out between this coming Wednesday and the next Wednesday when it's released, but I'll have more info on it. And I'd like to thank everyone again for joining in with the chat. And it was a wonderful chat on the third week of April and everything outside of it. But just keep keep praying and pray against any rituals, any plans of the enemy. I know that this coming week is a high ritual time, but it doesn't mean that we can't pray against it. And we don't have to fear evil or the perspective of evil taking place. I just want you guys to all remember that. and it was always a pleasure chatting with you guys, and it's hard to believe that an hour has already gone by. This chat flew by very fast. It was really great chatting with all of you. But I hope that you guys all have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you on next Monday's stream. I'll have Ronnie from the Limitless channel on to talk about parabolic teachings, and check out this Wednesday for a new video, and sometime in there, I guess you guys will get to finally see the face behind the name. But take care and God bless.